All right, welcome back, everyone. Calling a Man's Answers 63, I think. Don't hold me accountable. I don't know. I just do this. Today, my guest is a doctor, actually, a PhD. Go ahead and introduce yourself without further ado.
All right, so I'm Lebaron Agostini, or Dr. Lebaron Agostini. PhD is in cancer biology, genetics, and genomics, with an emphasis in molecular therapeutics. And I'm a consultant. That's my day job. And then I run the Lead the Scientist Instagram page where I post sciencey shit with kind of no filter, and here I am.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I came across your page. I was like, that seems like someone that I would love to talk to. Especially, let's just start out from the jump. What you said, cancer biology. What is that like studying that? What was it like doing undergrad and graduate school or medical school doing that? What is studying cancer biology like?
Yeah, so first, I guess I'll start with my undergrad. My bachelor's degree is in um, molecular and cellular biology with the emphasis in molecular genetics. And so what that means is understanding the machinery of how the genetic information is processed is like molecular genetics. So, because there's different, genetics is kind of like it's a big field, and then there's like subspecialties. And people will study like population genetics or inheritance. I don't really study that stuff. I studied like the biochemistry of how genetic information is processed, and then like kind of like the downstream signaling pathways. And so that was my background. um, and then I was like, okay, what do I do next? I used to want to be a pharmacist, at least when I started undergrad. And I worked in a pharmacy during undergrad and realized I didn't want to go to grad school for that. So then I started doing undergraduate research, and something totally different. I didn't even do cancer research yet. I was actually looking for antibiotics from soil bacteria,
Hmm.
which was like super interesting. A lot of like organic chemistry stuff. And then I end up, working. I graduated. I worked at the University of Miami doing diabetes research. Again, super different. And then I was like, okay, I want to make drugs. I want to, really have like this. I want to understand and learn about cancer. Because my background was in molecular genetics, cancer is essentially a genetic disease. So I was like, let me go get a PhD in cancer biology. And then applied a bunch of places, got into a few places, ended up going to Thomas Jefferson University. And studying cancer biology is really, again, it's like this huge term, and there's a bunch of different subspecialties. But broadly speaking, you understand why cancers occur, understand the biology that governs them, and then hopefully, with that understanding, you can create therapies. So that was what my PhD was really focused on.
So I talked to a virologist not too long ago. I talked to him twice, and
Kenneth,
yes.
I know him. Yeah.
And so, but we were talking about, we dabbled in the first time we talked cancer a little bit. I don't know that much about cancer, but I know that it's a mutation that kind of just keeps jumping, right? Just give me and everybody else a little background on what cancer is. And you said like why it occurs. What did you find that why it occurs, in society so much?
Yeah. So, I mean, cancer is really a disease of old age. And so, for an analogy that kind of makes sense to everybody is that, you got a car for a long time. No matter what you do, you just drive things get old and they break. Well, so that happens inside of cells too. As you age, the cells get replenished, but they also age, the cells age as well. And things just don't work the same. The systems in the body don't work the same. And so mutations occur and they build up, and eventually mutations occur in genes that are important for stopping cells from becoming cancers. And then once those genes are mutated, then the cell just proliferates. Essentially, it's called transformation, and cells transformed, and then it just proliferates uncontrollably. Because at that point, cells in your body kind of understand that they're cells in the body. They know that they're part of this greater infrastructure that makes up an organism. The cancer cell doesn't give a fuck about that anymore. It is like, I want to survive. I'm going to do things that help me survive in whatever environment I'm in. And so, yeah, so we realize that, most of these things are just what we call stochastic, meaning that they happen randomly because people are old. And some of that is the cells, and also some of that is the immune system. The immune system normally keeps cancer cells in check, kills them when it realizes it's a cancer cell. But as you age, your immune system starts to fail. It gets less diligent, it gets less effective. So there's like kind of like a perfect storm of things that occur, and that's why people get cancer mostly. Also, things can give you cancer. You know, smoking, alcohol,
the sun,
chemicals, the sun. You know, and there's nothing special about the sun specifically. The sun is just a giant energy source, and it emits UV rays, right? And those UV rays hit cells and create these things called pyrimidine dimers, which essentially you take two nucleotides, which are the letters of the genome, and the energy literally fuses them together. It creates a covalent bond, and that's called a pyrimidine dimer. And so when those two nucleotides fuse together, they make a little bridge, and then the machinery that's supposed to read the DNA and then like duplicate it and all that stuff doesn't understand what to do with this. And so that can cause repair mechanisms to come, try to fix it, and sometimes they fix it incorrectly, and then that's a mutation. And then kind of go down this mutational cascade where that cell can then turn into a tumor cell.
Yeah, and cancer is fascinating because, like you said, it is like an old age disease, but it happens. It could happen in anyone, and the one that's the saddest the most is little kids. You know, when they get cancer. Do we know why it is? Why is it just because of that? What you said, just like maybe some things gave them cancer, like microwaves and things like that. I know South Park. I'm getting my information from a TV show.
No, not to worry about microwaves. But so kids actually this is gonna sound not weird, but kids get they only get a few different types of cancer. They get things like, and mostly it's because of genetic predisposition. Like they inherited some rare genetic disease that increases their cancer susceptibility. Or they get, leukemias, they get sarcomas, they get osteosarcomas. Sarcomas are like cancers of like the soft tissue, like muscle cancers and stuff like that. Osteosarcomas are bone cancers. Kids get that, teenagers get that. And then kids get leukemia, like all the time. But we're really good at curing leukemia in children. Actually, they do really well on treatment.
Really? Why is that?
The childhood, we think it's, so leukemia is a blood cancer. And what happens is what we think, we don't really know. What we think is that the bone marrow is young, essentially, and to kill the cancer, we essentially have to get close to eliminating a person's bone marrow and killing the cancer cells. And we think that children, because the bone marrow is young, because they're young, they bounce back their bone marrow bounces back really well from, the chemo and radiation and all those things. And also kids are young, they're healthy mostly. They don't have any comorbidities or diseases that are also occurring with their cancer. Like old people have like cardiovascular issues because they're old as hell, and then they have cancer. So then like the drugs that would make cardiovascular issues worse, you got to really pay attention to that in old people. But in little kids or in adolescents, they don't have any other diseases. They just have the cancer. And so it allows you to kind of treatment intensify, and they just do better on therapy. And so they have a higher cure rate. Also, leukemias in general, if caught early, have a pretty decent cure or remission rate. So and again, cancer is like a big term. So some cancers we have really great treatments for, and some cancers are a fucking nightmare.
What's the worst cancer to get if you had I heard pancreatic's pretty bad, right?
So that's my PhD focused on pancreatic cancer as the disease model. It's a nightmare. There's just not a lot of therapies that work. Like if you get diagnosed with pancreatic cancer today, you're probably gonna live for like 15 to 18 months.
That's insane. And why is that?
Like on average. Well, mostly because most of the patients that get diagnosed, they have metastatic disease, meaning that it's already spread to other organs. And that's because we don't have any screening or blood tests or anything like that to help detect pancreatic cancer. So usually a patient comes in, they have jaundice, which is a yellowing of the skin and the eyes, or they have some bowel pain, or there's some blood in the stool or something like that. And they're like, okay, I need to go to the doctor. And then it's like, okay, well, like a lot of different things can cause the pain and the blood in the stool thing. And so then eventually we get to a point where it's like, okay, let's do like a CT scan and look at your pancreas. And then, we do a CT and it's all over the place, followed by PET scan, and then really see so it's already advanced. And because it's advanced, it's harder to treat. That's true for all cancers. Once it's spread, it's just harder to treat. And then there's not a lot of drugs that work. For some reason, pancreatic cancers are chemo-resistant, meaning that chemotherapy just doesn't work as well. And we don't have targeted therapies for pancreatic cancer like we do for other tumor types, like breast cancer or lung cancer, for example.
Breast
So
cancer is
really
gnarly.
bad.
Breast cancer is gnarly too, because if you catch it, the chance of survival is high, right? But if it comes back in remission, it's like the chance of mortality is really high, right?
That's with every cancer though. You catch it early and it's like, woman does like a mammogram, so they'll have a lump and they do a biopsy and they're like, that's cancer, we're going to take it out. and give you some chemo and some surgery and really good survival rates. But a lot of people still relapse, meaning that the cancer comes back. And when the cancer comes back, it's usually harder to treat.
Why? Two questions. Sorry. One, why does the cancer come back? What do we know why? And second, why is it harder to treat once it comes back?
So the answer to your first question is the lump, the tumor that we visualize, that we could see with our naked eye, is like millions of cells, right? But you only need one cancer cell to restart that tumor. So when you do surgery, what they call complete resection, it means that they got all of the tumor that they can visually see, and then they take the surrounding area of the tumor, what they call the margins. It's negative margins, means they've gotten all that area. And then there's pathology to look. Is there any cancer cells around the area that we took? And that's called like a complete resection. Still, that's not good enough to know if there's one cancer cell that made its way to the bone and it's just chilling. And then 6 years later, it's grown enough for it to be a tumor again. And again, most patients come back with some symptom, and the symptom is because there's a mass growing in a place it shouldn't be. There are relatively few cancers that we have like blood tests for from a detection perspective, or like screening or something like that. Prostate is one of them. Breast cancer is another one, but it's not blood tests. Like, we're literally checking for lumps. So there's just not a lot, unfortunately. To answer your second question, why is it more resistant, is because that cancer has undergone some level of treatment. It survived for whatever reason. It not only survived because it wasn't in the surgical area, it usually probably survived because it was resistant to the therapy. But because it's one cell, it takes a long time for it to grow back. And so now that it's grown, from that one cell to hundreds of millions of cells again, and the tumors, then you can't use the same therapy again. You got to use different therapies. And sometimes those different therapies are just not as effective.
So you said earlier that cancer doesn't give a fuck about the whole system like your cells do. Why is that? Do we know why that is?
Well, you got to think. You ever watch Cells at Work on Netflix?
No, I haven't. I'm sorry.
It's like a biology cartoon or whatever. I haven't watched it either, but it turns out it's really popular. So the premise of that though is that their immune system is like construction workers and like police and stuff, and like they live in the body, and it's like a whole organization, and everybody's communicating with each other. And that's kind of how the body works, right? Like, all of the body has the same genetic information, but my elbow is different from my asshole. And that's because they're reading different, pages in this encyclopedia of information, so to speak. And they also understand that the cells next to them are also asshole cells, and my elbow cells know that they're next to elbow cells. So there's communication there. Part of the reason that cancer cells don't care is because they undergo something called anchorage independence, meaning that they can not be attached to other cells. And so the communication requirement that normal cells have from rubbing shoulders with other cells goes away. And also the cell is built to survive within the body in its context. All cells are, right, to absorb nutrients. And the cancer cell's primary focus becomes that. Whatever the activity of that cell was beforehand, like saliva cells make saliva. Once you get a tumor there or that cancer cell, it goes, okay, I'm not going to worry about making saliva anymore. I'm just going to worry about proliferating. Like, so making saliva becomes like a secondary thing for me now. Proliferation becomes my primary goal. And the reason of that is because the things that transform what make a cancer cell essentially hijack the molecular machinery within inside of a cell. And those proteins are mutated, so they're not working correctly, and they're driving the cell to proliferate. So yeah, at the root of it, the machinery that's inside the cell is not working correctly, and that's causing all of this to happen.
Yeah, and therefore it sounds like a virus to an extent. Learned about viruses and stuff.
Yeah,
Were they like
similar analogy, but
were they like but the only thing is it's our own cells and they're living. So one thing that always like I don't understand, most people probably don't either, is what's the difference or why the difference happens between benign and malignant. I think it's malignant, right? That's the word for that. Why do some cells like why are they benign and why are some not? And why do some like really keep growing and spreading and everything like that? And why do some stay in one place?
Yeah, so that really is about the genetic drivers. Tumors, so the word tumor itself just means like a mass of cells that are growing in that space. And there's like a lot of things that can cause that, breakdown. And again, like the body is like super organized, this human thing that we, running around in is like super organized, like skin is layered in a very like set way. And that happens in all of the cells. All of your organs are constructed in like this very set way. And so what happens is when you get tissue damage or cells get damaged, you disrupt that organization, you can get a tumor. And those cells may be genetically different, but they're not truly transformed cells. And so the tumor isn't spreading, but it may be growing rapidly, but not so much that it's going to spread to other parts of the body. Malignant cells are truly transformed cells. They are going to grow in a tumor and start to spread in a process called metastasis. And there's a whole bunch of some cancers, there's genetic drivers that drive that, and in some cancers, there's not genetic drivers that do that. And different cancers metastasize at different rates. Some are highly metastatic, some aren't. And it all depends on the genetics that are on at the time and off in those particular cells. So yeah, that's really it. And with benign tumors, you just remove them, and then it's over. The malignant stuff, that's what we have to worry about spread. You take the primary tumor out, but then you still have smaller tumors in other places that will eventually get big. And that's really the stuff that kills you. It's not always the tumor in the location where it started. It's for example, like lung cancer, one of the common places that those cancer cells travel to is the brain. So not only are your lungs going to eventually stop working because the cancer is just going to grow and decrease the lung function, but also the cancer goes to the brain and then it starts to occupy not a lot of room in the brain for other things that aren't supposed to be there. So then the tumor starts to grow there, and then eventually, you get a mass in the tumor, it causes damage, damage to neurons, you die. That's kind of how it goes. So yeah, it's just very complicated in that way.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about if those tumors in the brain, if they damage the neurons in any way, but you just answered that.
Just from like just growing in that space.
Yeah, so the tricky thing about cancer is like when you think about it, it's like when something's growing, and the correlation between something growing in your body and that's not supposed to be there, and then death. How does tumors and cancer itself kill you specifically?
Yeah, it's just the cancer cell kills you because it's creating a disruption in the normal function of whatever organ it's supposed to be in, right? So like your liver is super important, your kidney super important. Like we know that we can't live without these organs. So eventually the tumor burden becomes so much in an organ that the organ ceases to function, and that's really how people die. It's not that the cancer is secreting something or anything like that. It's almost like just causing trauma to the organ. If you shot someone in the heart, it caused a puncture and stuff like that. Also, heart cancers are super rare, but let's just use this as an example. You would cause damage to the heart and it would, stop it from functioning. Blood would be squared and all that stuff. Eventually, the cancer cell grows in a space and then just ruptures the tissue around it because it's just growing out of control. And then the organ just stops working. So, and same thing with pancreas. You need your pancreas. Even though the pancreas not working will reduce your lifespan. You could technically live without a pancreas. We could supplement some of the things that the pancreas does, but you will not live as long. It's really the liver failure and all these things. And the problem we don't use transplant to cure patients, at least with solid tumors, is because we can't just take the organ out and then give you a new organ, because the cancer that's there that we don't know about will eventually just repopulate.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, and for organs like that and stuff, I was going to ask you a question about the heart. Well, first and foremost, you said heart cancer to the heart is really rare. Do we know why that is?
So the heart cells don't really replicate. That's part of it too. Which is why brain tumors are also rare, relatively speaking, compared to all of the other cancers.
Unless it moves to the brain.
Yeah, I mean, so patients will, technically it's not a brain tumor, it's a tumor that's in the brain. Usually we call it like a CNS, like a central nervous system metastasis, because the tumor didn't arise in the brain. It's actually a lung tumor that's growing in the brain. But normally for people to just have brain tumors is pretty rare. And so the cells of the heart don't replicate. And so they have a lower potential for turning into a cancer cell. They also have a lower potential for turning into a cancer cell because it's not exposed to anything. So like skin cancers are super common because the sun is here and the sun is trying to cook you.
I know, it's crazy too. The sun fascinates me because not only do you need the sun to feel good, you need vitamin D, but you also, if you get too much of it, you die. It's
so skin cancer is higher in Australia because people are outside all the time.
Yeah, and in I know Bob Marley died of skin cancer, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, yeah, which is interesting, but Bob Marley's kind of light skinned, he's lighter than I was.
Yeah.
Well, everybody gets cancer. African Americans get melanoma, so the incidence is rarer in African Americans, but usually the cancer is more aggressive, and we really don't understand why that is.
Yeah, that's another question I had for you about cancer. Does it attack certain specific people differently? Does it attack, well, obviously not barring gender, for prostate and breast
right,
cancer?
Yeah, because women don't have prostates, right? So they don't get prostate cancer. But no, I know what you mean. Or continue.
No, yeah, just, I mean, if you understand what I'm saying, I was gonna say, does it attack specific ethnicities, races differently and stuff like that?
Yeah, so some of it is some of it is environmental. In Asian countries, they get this thing called a liver fluke, which is a parasite that can give you liver cancer. And gastric cancer is more common in Asian countries. And even lung cancer, which is super common in the US. Asian Americans and Asians that get lung cancer, they have a higher rate of something called an EGFR mutation. It stands for epidermal growth factor receptor. I don't exactly know why that is. This is a really cancer genetics question. We have done the studies to know that it occurs more rapidly. We don't really understand why those groups of people get those types of cancers more frequently, because it's a mix of things. But again, we're all, we're closer to each other than we are farther apart, genetically speaking, but we're also different enough that the genetic composition of our cells and the organs and all that stuff can impact the amount or the way cancers form. For example, triple negative breast cancer in African American women, more aggressive, more common in African American women. We think there's a genetic factor there. Not exactly sure what that genetic factor is, because things are not usually they're not exactly linear. Some diseases are this mutation causes this disease. Awesome. Because we can try to create solutions for that. But most of the diseases are clear, they have multiple genetic factors. They're multifactorial. So it's not one gene causes it. It's these 7 genes helped cause this thing. And in a different person, it was these 14 genes that weren't working correctly. And it's really hard to do population studies on that stuff. Statistically, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, that can make sense. And like you said, some things, are direct causations. Clearly, if you're smoking cigarettes, that clearly causes lung cancer.
Yeah.
Stop smoking cigarettes if you don't want lung cancer. That's there's the correlation.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and chewing tobacco, mouth cancer, stuff like that. But
right, exactly.
But alcohol is an interesting one because it doesn't just cause liver cancer, right? It can cause cancer to all sorts of things.
Yeah. So alcohol increases your risk for certain cancers, and smoking increases your risk for pancreatic cancer.
Really?
Yeah, we don't know why.
So what does alcohol increase your risk for besides liver cancer?
Um, I think alcohol. So I think alcohol has the entire. If I'm thinking about these studies correctly, alcohol in general increases your cancer risk the same way that obesity in general increases your overall cancer risk.
And why is that? Because it's poison? Is that like the straightforward answer?
Well, alcohol in particular is like why it causes liver cancer is because literally liver cells are dying, and alcohol is a toxin for all intents and purposes. It's a toxin. Um, and so the liver cells essentially stop working or changes the way that they work, and that increases your risk of cancer. It makes your liver more fatty, all these things. The obesity thing, we think part of it has to do with the different inflammation profile that obese people have. Like the protein signaling pathways are different in obese people. We think that has a reason or impacts the cancer risk. Um, and then overall, like people are usually obese because of just like poor lifestyle habits. And so is it really that they're greater than 35% body fat, or is it that they just have a culmination of unhealthy eating habits and activity habits, and that increases their cancer risk? It's a hard question to ask because we don't have a controlled study to make people fat and then make them healthy, like
Yeah.
healthy lifestyle, but fat person. They would have to have like some type of like physiological genetic disease, which then again, that's a confounding factor. And then we can't do another study. So a lot of these studies where we look for associations are like, we're literally just looking at people like in the broad society and then seeing what the associations are and then testing whether or not those things are like statistically significant. That's like the first thing you do when you're looking for an association. Like, is it more occurring in certain populations? And so like the smoking thing for pancreatic cancer, it's like people who smoke are more likely to get pancreatic cancer. Why? I have no idea.
Toxins.
We don't. Yeah, it's just like we know it's easier with lung cancer because like we know smokers, like when we look at the lungs, we know that there's more mutations that are driven by the things, the carcinogens and nicotine and smoking, all that stuff. Like patients who smoke that have lung cancer have like their tumors are literally genetically different than patients who have lung cancer and don't smoke.
So for
They
your
respond better to therapy and everything.
personal professional opinion, what we're seeing right now with kids my age or younger, vapes, right? Everybody's vaping. I don't. I got onto it when I was like 16 and I stopped when I was like 18 because I was like, I don't like this. I don't want to do this. I don't even know why
Yeah.
I'm doing it. Do you think that we haven't seen it because we haven't done the long-term study, but do you think that vapes are going to cause lung cancer the same way that smoking cigarettes does?
So it's interesting. I don't really know. I don't know. And I don't know because I haven't seen whatever the data is available. So let me like full disclosure. The difference between like what I do and like what like an oncologist does, who goes to medical school, has an MD, and then goes does a residency and all those things, is that they treat patients. They're like they see patients, they write prescriptions, they diagnose. They're trying to understand these like health impact stuff. Like how does the world impact a person's health, and then how can I help understand that? My PhD is really focused around understanding tumor biology and then creating drugs that kill tumor cells and keep the patient alive. So a lot of these questions, which I get asked these questions all the time because everywhere wants to know these things. We like understand like because this thing causes cancer and like, how does this stuff work? I don't really know the answers to that stuff, and I don't really read that literature because I'm also not like a epidemiologist or like a population geneticist who like looks at that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If you're gonna ask me, hey, does this molecule specifically have like a cancer risk? It's like, yeah, I got a resource for that. I'll look that up because I'm more on like the biochemistry of tumors.
But in your professional opinion, do you think it's going to cause cancer?
Um, I don't know because like for example, there's not an association between marijuana use and lung cancer.
Yeah, see, I was gonna get into that with you. I just didn't know your personal
So
opinion. That marijuana, I was thinking about this when we were talking about alcohol. Sorry for everyone that wanted the vape question. You're gonna have to wait. I was thinking about that. We have the two drugs that were commonly pushed by a bunch of companies and very legal for 18 and now 21 for everything: tobacco and or nicotine and um, alcohol directly
Yeah.
cause health effects, directly cause death. Doesn't have to be cancer, but they directly cause death and unhealthy lifestyles. And marijuana, which is a more timid drug, it causes probably less deaths than alcohol does, not related to.
Yeah, definitely for sure.
Yeah, like people are eating. Maybe their eating habits aren't the greatest, but
Yeah.
that could be for society's problems, making McDonald's
Like
and
pure
stuff.
death, it's like really hard to OD on like
Marijuana.
THC.
Yeah, and also you're not
Yeah,
going to get
it's
up and
really hard.
you don't want to go drive somewhere when you're high. You're like, oh, do I really got to do that right now? Nobody wants to do that.
Yeah. I
When
will
you're,
say this though. I definitely think I'm not a, marijuana use, whatever floats your boat, as long as, you're not hurting people,
Mhm.
in my personal opinion. I think it's bullshit that it's illegal and alcohol is legal. Like, alcohol kills like thousands of Americans, if not millions of Americans, and definitely influences death because people are driving with DUIs and killing other people and themselves. So like the fact that that shit's legal and that marijuana isn't legal doesn't make any sense to me. But just from a health perspective, we know a few things about marijuana use. Marijuana use in adolescence, people who's, teenagers, brains are still figuring out, they're still maturing, all that shit. There's a ton of literature and studies looking at this, and cognitive function and memory will decline if people are introduced to marijuana earlier in age. That makes sense. There's a psychedelic effect. These drugs work on receptors in your brain. There's that makes a ton of sense. Kids should not be smoking marijuana. Fair enough. But for adults, at least from a cancer biology perspective, I haven't come across any data that looks at that. But also too, because it's been illegal, it's really hard to get accurate, large
Yeah.
assessments of it, because even gauging marijuana use is really hard because, again, we're like using survey data, which is like the weakest form of large scale data
Yeah.
approaches, because like people can just lie.
Somebody should just slow
uh,
down Snoop Dogg and Wiz Khalifa and track their
yeah,
life.
right. See, yeah, but you got like the old lady that smokes 10 packs of cigarettes a day and then like gets hit by a car and like doesn't have lung cancer. That shit happens all the time. So yeah, the marijuana thing is like, and also too, on the flip side, marijuana definitely doesn't cure cancer. I have had that debate a lot.
I didn't think it
um,
cured cancer, but I will say this: why do you two questions? Why doesn't the smoke, if you know, cause cancer in the lungs? Because you would think smoke and anything like people got lung cancer from Vietnam and the gases there. Toxins into the lungs usually has
yeah,
a
but it's what's in
direct.
the gas that matters.
But why do you think, or why do you, if you know, why does marijuana smoke not cause cancer?
Yeah, I don't think there's a few things. I think as like, so marijuana is getting legalized, and I think in like 2 decades we'll really know if there's an increase risk as things get regulated, and then like use gets easier to like acknowledge from like a study perspective. um and then it won't be illegal. So like even doing studies with marijuana is like extremely difficult, because for all intents and purposes it's still a controlled substance by the federal government, and that just creates a huge barrier to do any studies with it. But like you can start like a smoking cessation study like no problem at your university. So studying these things is difficult in that part. But I just think that the small molecules, the chemistry that's in marijuana, the THC and all that stuff, just doesn't have a carcinogenic effect, unlike the things that are in tobacco that do have a carcinogenic effect. And the smoking stuff, now smoking does stuff to the esophagus and the lungs. It causes the cilia to paralyze and all different types of physiological effects, but does it cause tissue damage and mutations? Because ultimately that's what you need to get cancer. You need something that's going to generate mutations in a cell. For whatever reason, well, not for whatever reason, but the chemistry that's there. And again, too, I don't know how many hundreds of molecules are in marijuana. We know what's in cigarettes because they're highly regulated. And so we know that these compounds are carcinogens because we study it because it's highly regulated. We don't really know all of the things that are in marijuana. Probably have cataloged a lot of those molecules because people are studying all of the molecules inside of marijuana. But at least the data thus far, it doesn't seem like there's any increased cancer risk thus far.
Well, marijuana too, it helps cancer patients with hunger, right? With eating, correct?
Yeah, and some, yeah. I mean, there's also some. Hey, listen, if I was a physician and if I was going to give a patient opiates versus having them smoke a joint, I would say, hey, listen, try smoking a joint and see if you feel better. You know, does that help control your pain? And if it helped control their pain, I'd rather give them that than give them opiates,
Yeah, one
which
thing
we
that
know can cause respiratory depression.
yeah, and one thing that I think is a problem. Now, okay. I go to college in Oregon. So,
Oh,
they just
I have friends in Oregon.
so when they just decriminalize drugs, two things. One of them, I understand where you're going with this. People shouldn't be in jail for addictions. There should be another way to fight it. But one thing I
Yeah,
think is good is we have people are getting addicted to these prescription drugs, these opiates, when there
yeah,
are certain things that could help people's mental health that are natural, like marijuana, low doses of marijuana, CBD, and like I don't know if you're anything into psychedelics, but they're doing the psilocybin trials on people with mental health
yeah.
issues
And
and
PTSD.
in PTSD,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they're seeing real correlations with a better life. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm there's no overdoses, anything. I think at small doses with natural elements. Now, acid obviously was created in a lab, but with like a psilocybin, that's something that's naturally created that doesn't cause respiratory, what you said, depression.
Depression.
Yeah, I feel like it's
So,
better for you.
so there's an interesting point. There's two things you said that I'll touch on. The first thing is that I'm all for. I think as a scientist, right, we're supposed to be like very objective and and almost robotic in a sense, like pursuing questions for the truth and not inputting our own bias on them and those things. But the reality is that we're human, and so when we live in we all operate in a culture in a society, right? And I think when there's a societal perspective on something like marijuana use, it gets really hard, or even drug use in general, it gets really hard to like actually ask scientific questions like, hey, does mushrooms help PTSD? Like, we're doing that study now. Mushrooms have been around forever. That should have been a study in the 70s that should have done. We should, if it turns out that that's positive, we've wasted like decades over philosophical bullshit when it comes to like leveraging something that could have been effective and helped people, right? Because of this perception on drug use and in drugs in general. So that's my opinion on that. And I'm all for these studies because then we will really know whether they work at helping these things.
Yeah.
Randomize people, you guys get mushrooms, you guys get placebo, whose PTSD gets better. Get 1,000 people, 500, 500, do the stats, boom, mushrooms help people with PTSD. There should not be a reason why we shouldn't be able to give people mushrooms if they have PTSD, if that's what the study says. Like, there shouldn't
No,
be a
for
reason
sure.
we don't do that. As far as the natural versus synthetic thing, some of the most toxic things on the planet are made by plants and insects and bacteria. Natural does not imply better in general. Because, like,
The puffer
all of
fish.
the, huh?
The
Right,
puffer
yeah. I
fish. Yeah.
mean, fungi produce crazy stuff. Most of the antibiotics that we make actually were synthesized from other bacteria. We just find out what those things are and then make them better drugs, so to speak. A lot of the initial chemotherapeutics came from plants. So we just use chemistry to make these things better, right? And what we mean by that is like there's two elements in pharmacology, or um, two characteristics that all drugs have: pharmacodynamic characteristics, which is what the drug does, and then pharmacokinetic characteristics, which is how does the drug work in your body? Like, is it eliminated by like urine or poop or sweat, or how does it get metabolized? How long is it in the body for? That's pharmacokinetics. And so sometimes drugs are really effective at doing something, but they have poor pharmacokinetic properties. You can't take them orally. We got to make them IV. They have really short half-lives. That means that you got to give a patient a lot of it for it to work. because it gets rapidly metabolized. So then we use medicinal chemistry to add molecules and synthesize things that come from natural products. They're not synthetic because we made them, but they're better versions of the natural products. So natural doesn't mean better. Plenty of natural shit that could ruin your life. In general, I think the natural appeal is especially in our lifetime. It's really a marketing thing. It's really a way to use natural and associate it with health and a way to sell products. But you talk to any chemist or anything like that, natural, synthetic, tomato, banana, they're both fruit in this context.
Yeah, especially since we have scientists who can create things that are better than natural chemicals, correct? Right.
Yeah.
I think the whole thing is a lot of especially drugs related, is a lot of not. I'm talking about like drugs that alter the state of mind. The addiction's a big problem with synthetic, right? And with natural, there's not really. I don't really know. Besides nicotine and tobacco, there's not really and caffeine. There's not really
Yeah.
addictive chemical in marijuana. I guess you can get addicted to the feeling, but that seems more like a personal kind of addiction than it
Yeah. I
is
mean,
a
addiction in
chemical.
itself is like there's a biochemical element, and then there's also like the mental element. There's, so pharmacogenomics is like the study of like how genetic differences impact drug metabolism and effect and stuff like that. And we know certain people have what we call polymorphisms or haplotypes, means groups of inherited genes that impact how they experience drugs. So like you can literally inherit genes that make you more prone to alcohol addiction, for
Yeah,
example. And so it's like we know that there's a physiological thing, but again, like if somebody is smoking marijuana or a mushroom, whatever, so much that they have let it impact their life negatively, they probably have other psychological coping issues. And the marijuana is just like the vessel in which they're trying to escape from those things. It's not
yeah,
really about
yeah,
the weed, right? Like it's about them and their situation more
yeah.
so.
Not being all right in their own head. I found
Right.
that getting older, that my brain works in a certain way where, not that I'm like increased in depression or anything like that, but I think all the time, like you don't understand. I mean, you might be the same way, but like I'll just lay in bed over analyzing everything, just like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if I can't let it shut up. And I think a lot of people have that, but like I go into weird philosophical things sometimes. Like I was telling my friend, like I woke up in the middle of the night after I had like a very vivid dream, and I thought for 2 hours about like basically that how I have philosophical moments. I study philosophy, but about how like all I was the connection of genes from my ancestors and my parents, and that I'm not really special. Like I had that realization after 2 hours of thinking, and I was just like,
Right.
and I woke up the next day like, what the hell am I doing? And so
Yeah. That's not a very motivating perspective to have, right? Like
no,
I'm
it's very existential. I know.
yeah.
Tends to happen when you think philosophically about the universe, because it's just too like if you let yourself like feel how small you are as comparative to everything that we know, you can feel like you get squished. So you got to just like bring like, all right, I have a tape
Yeah.
clean, you know?
No, I totally feel. I mean, to be honest, I have like for me it's mostly with work now. I mean,
Mm.
I think part of the reason I became a scientist is because like as a little kid, I was just like super inquisitive and wanted to learn and really enjoyed learning. And school was like my escape. So like I grew up in like Brooklyn. I grew up in Flatbush, Brooklyn. Not in the greatest neighborhoods and not with like a ton of money, with no money actually. And school was like my outlet, school and sports. And so I just like dived into that. But like why school was like really good for me, it was also because I was just like, I still to this day I have this like, I'm always thinking, I have this super busy brain. I talk fast. That's just kind of like my character. And I used to be like that when I was younger, where I was, more like thinking about my place in the universe and stuff like that. And I think now it's like I'm really just focused on like living this one life that I have, because we only get one. I don't have any religious beliefs or anything like that. So it's like I got 80 years, or I can get hit by a bus tomorrow. Who knows? But I have whatever that time is that I'm allotted to make as much difference as possible, to enjoy my life and try to like do right and to live a happy and healthy life. And if I can impact people in that process and do something good for the world, fucking great.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like my primary focus. And so like things like outside of that goal, really, I try to like push to the outskirts of my like consciousness. I try not to like think about it too much. Like, the world is like a crazy place. And it's like, like you ever heard this expression like first world problems?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, we like probably bitch about things all the time where it's like first world problems and stuff. And I'm like, it's bad out there. And it's like, I used to get caught up in thinking about how bad it is for other people, and it would be like depressing.
Yeah.
And so I just like, I had to like accomplish these goals. Like, and so like being goal oriented has also like helped like focus my attention so I can just think deeply about the things that I need to do to accommodate these goals. And not to say it's not a bad thing to think about the world on like broader perspectives, but you gotta like have a balance between letting your mind wander on things, especially when you're thinking deeply about it. Because then, like you said, you get into a space where like you're thinking really deeply about something, you come to a conclusion that's like, damn, now what do I do with that information or that insight now? Like, how do you let that insight impact you?
No, yeah,
So
for sure. Yeah, and that's what anybody wants to do in this life, right? I feel like most people's fear of death isn't really a fear of death; it's a fear of being inadequate when they die, right? I had that realization not too long ago. It's everybody wants to make a difference, but we forget that difference starts at the local level. If you want to change the world,
yeah,
you got to change yourself first. That's not my quote, so don't quote me on that one. That was somebody else, somebody way smarter than I.
right.
But if you want to, like that one, there's a famous video of that. I don't know if he was a Marine commander or something, but he's like, if you want to change the world, make your bed every morning, straighten yourself up. Or like, I don't know if you know who Jordan Peterson is. He always says, clean your room. And then like,
I have like a love hate. I'm like an 80% hate, 20% love with Jordan Peterson guy.
he's very, what is the word for it? Polarizing. That's the word.
He is very polarizing, but a lot of a lot of the stuff he says is like, in my opinion, it's not groundbreaking. Maybe because I got my shit together, and it's like
Yeah.
that's why it's not groundbreaking, right? But like, if I needed to get my shit together, listening to him probably would like be really important. Not to say I'm against guys who motivate, like motivational speakers and shit like that, because people
Yeah.
need more help than others. But like, this motherfucker's not Gandhi, okay? Like, he's
Yeah.
like telling people to like do shit they should already be doing for the most part. The part that I don't that gets me a little upset with him is that because he's like a psychologist, and I think this happens a lot with really smart people, particularly who have some status in the society or in scientists or whatever otherwise, is that he's often challenged by people who are not experts in shit that they're asking him about. So like he's debating or arguing with people who are not other psychologists. And so like he presents an idea like that's the clinical psychology idea set in stone.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is the truth. And I think it's important to like for everybody to understand that there are relatively few scientific truths, like pure truths that are like, hey, we know for sure that this is the case, because like especially in something like psychology where the probabilities and the nuances in human behavior are extreme, like because I'm in the physical sciences, right? Like we're killing things with chemicals and shit, and like we control the environment. It can only do so many different things, and statistics is really important there.
Mm-hmm.
And like we literally give patients drugs, and like it only works in like 50% of them. And sometimes we don't know why it doesn't work in the other 50%. So like when we give that patient a drug, we don't know if it's going to work. Sometimes you don't know if it's going to work for that patient or not. But we know if we do nothing at all, you'll be worse. Like, so that's why we suggest giving, we recommend, hey, let's try the treatment, let's do that. Because the probabilities, we know if we give it to 10 people, 7 live this long. We don't know if you're going to be the 3 or the 7. But we know doing nothing automatically makes you the 3 people where you have bad outcomes. And so that's how clinicians talk, and that's how the world operates. And he doesn't speak in that way. He doesn't speak like a scientist. He speaks like a politician. And I don't like that because you're not really representing science in that way. He he often needs to present ideas in a way like, some studies suggest this and this is what the data suggests, especially when you're in psychology, because this once you get out of the physical sciences, and what I mean like chemistry, biology, physics, shit like that, and you start getting into like sociology, psychology, political science, shit, even economics, which is like economics is not it's math, it's entrenched in math. Math is the tool of economics, but human behavior dictates the economic landscape. It is not like a cut and dry science. Like it is not fucking physics. So like when people say economists say this, and I'm just like, economists have very like widely different opinions on economic principles, and that's something that's like kind of fuzzy sometimes. We know that because like if it was that easy, then like we wouldn't be having economic issues, right? And so I'm just like he kind of annoys me a bit. And I feel like a lot of scientists, people with science backgrounds are in the spotlight, when they're doing really well in the public space, it's because they're not actually being great scientists. They have to kind of make the lines fuzzy for them to get popular appeal. It's a little annoying for me.
Yeah, look at Fauci. He said masks work, and then the emails came out, and he said masks don't work. It's like, bro, get your shit together. Everyone's listening to you in the United States.
This is an interesting. I had this discussion over the weekend actually. Fauci's a hard case here because I think he got caught between a rock and a hard place when you're in the public space. And I say this because when you're speaking to lay people who are not scientists, particularly in this space, we don't have, like, he doesn't have, first let me say, he's not a great scientific communicator. And what I mean by that is that he doesn't take the things that he knows are true and package them in a way that are understandable to the masses very well. But then again, that's not his job, really. His job is to lead the fucking NIH, be an immunologist. At the same time, he's put in public spotlight, and he should have been more careful about the messaging that he was delivering, definitely. But, so it's like kind of interesting there, and this happens to scientists all the time. You got people who are not great communicators to begin with. They're great scientists, that's why they're in these positions, and they just communicate things poorly. Or they say things that they think would be helpful, even though that being true all the time is always better than trying to mold the truth so that people can accept it and deal with it, in my opinion. And that's why I'm an asshole.
Scientific opinion, though. I feel like a lot of scientists hold that opinion.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely like the science world, like other scientists talk to each other in like a brutal fashion because we're like very blunt and there's like no time to be wasted when it comes to stuff like that. Everybody feels like what they do is like literally the most important thing in the universe.
Of course.
And so they're very like, like razor sharp. You kind of build a tough skin being a scientist because people are literally trying to poke holes in all of your arguments. And that's good. So it makes us better. But when you get into society and you're talking to normal people don't like that shit.
No, they don't.
So it's kind of it's an interesting thing. Like the reality is like, look how poor like mask wearing was so poor in this country, like mass adherence. Vaccine uptake is relatively poor, and it's like sometimes have to deal with public society, and it's like, do I want to argue with people and say, hey, listen, you should get the vaccine because of like all of these foundational scientific concepts? All of that becomes irrelevant when you think that the government is trying to poison you.
Yep.
Like all of that entire argument doesn't matter when you think the government is trying to poison you. So wearing a mask, all of the good scientific reasons behind that, or me having the foresight as about, listen, this is probably going to get worse and we should say this because X, Y, and Z. None of that matters when you think the government's trying to poison you. So I think it's hard. It's a hard place for him to be in, and he fucked up. But the reality of the situation is that he was doing the things he was supposed to do and making like the proper guideline as far as like the decision making is concerned for like the population. I think he should have been less in the spotlight, but then again, he didn't really have a choice because of all of these other issues, with the president, all this shit. So yeah, it's a kind of crazy situation.
So with that, we're talking about influential people. How do you feel about, somebody who's so influential who's not a politician, not a politician, not a scientist, he's not even a philosopher, but he has the most influential show and people listen to him. How do you feel about Joe Rogan and his influence, especially when he talks about the vaccine and he told like countless 21-year-olds to not get it because you should, and then people listen to that because he's the most
Yeah.
influential speaker probably right now.
How do I feel about it? I feel like there's only two ways to feel about it. You believe that we operate in a country where people can speak freely and it is what it is, or you think that what he's doing is irresponsible and therefore we should do something about it. So I'm the latter. I believe we operate, in a country
Yeah.
where she could speak whatever. He's popular. He fucked up. He says shit that's crazy. This is why scientific literacy is super important. He should be able to say something that's completely ridiculous. Like if he gets on his show and he's like, "Yeah, bleach will cure your esophageal cancer." Do I expect if if not hundreds, maybe thousands of people to be like, drink bleach? Yes, that totally could happen. He has one of the most popular podcasts on the fucking planet. I also expect people to go, you know what? If it was that easy, I think they would have figured that out already.
You hope. Honestly, you hope.
I would hope. That's what I hope for the society I live in.
Yeah, then you go to In and Out and it's a touchless sensor and some guy's ripping it trying to fucking get the ice out and you're like, "Oh, this is people in society, man.
Yeah,
There are some Neanderthals out there for sure." But I think most people have the common sense to not drink bleach in that specific.
most definitely. I mean,
Most
I
is
got a little bit away.
generous though.
Yeah, I got away from so I have like almost like 10,000 followers on Instagram, right? And the reason I got those followers was from arguing with people mostly.
Yeah.
I would like, when GMOs were really controversial a few years ago, I was like a big GMO advocate because like genetic engineering could like change our whole landscape. And people were super afraid, and this crazy government shit and vaccines, and I was arguing a lot, and that produced like a lot of trending flair and all that stuff. So I got a lot of scientific following, but I had to step away from that because like doing that on social media because it's just not a good use of my time, honestly. Like I'm totally here to help people. People are in my DMs asking scientific questions or want to learn about stuff, or hey, I'm prepping for an interview. Can you help me? I'm a PhD student. Yo, listen, get in my inbox. I'll help you out. Follow me on LinkedIn. All that shit. I will help 999 whatever people that follow me if I can. But like just debating on social media, I just can't do it anymore, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, my I don't debate people on social media for that reason. I debate people in real life quite a bit, but
Yeah.
I one thing I have to keep my eyes open for is people tend to clip things that I say. Maybe they're not exactly what I say, and oh, this guy's a piece of shit, blah, 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 white supremacist. No, I am not a white supremacist. First off,
Oh my god.
he's a misogynist. And then I'm just like, if I watch it, I can get myself like, you motherfucker, like start getting all mad. It's like, I
Yeah.
can't. Anything I get tagged in, I get scared or I get sent to me. Sometimes they send it to me. And I'm just like, oh, man, you gotta take a step back of social media if you have a little bit of a following, because there's always going to be people who tend to come at you with knives. Sometimes it's more people with knives than it is with hearts and hugs.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's like that's fucked up because you should be able to just like have a conversation and not like, yo, don't get me wrong. If you said something that was like ridiculous, like you N-word, I'm like,
Yeah.
you might be a racist. But having a conversation about something is like to be honest, I have like my political and world views are like very different and like they're all over the place. And that's a good thing. I love talking to people and having different opinions and understanding where people are coming from and all that stuff. I don't like getting into a screaming match or like not having a civil conversation with somebody, or then because my views don't align with someone, now it's like we have an issue, and all that social media amplifies that whole issue into a volcano.
Yeah.
And
Especially because, oh no, finish what you're going to say.
no, I was not. Keep going. Yeah.
I was going to say, especially because, like, if I'm sitting here talking to you or we're in person and like maybe we'd get in a screaming match, but you wouldn't say nearly what you would say on the internet behind a screen.
Oh yeah.
People say some outlandish shit on
Oh
Twitter.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's that. How would
Oh,
you?
I've been called like super racist shit on Instagram.
I am sure you
Like,
have.
and we're having like a science argument.
In a science argument, they're talking racial
And it's,
slurs.
bro, I'm telling you, because the reality is like, again, I was like, so I'm 31. I started my page, I had a regular page that turned into like a science page, probably like 25 or something, like 26 or something like that, maybe even younger. And then like I had it all through grad school. And I was like more vulgar before, right? So like, call somebody an idiot or something like that, or like, yo, what you're saying doesn't make any sense, whatever. And it's like all of a sudden the science argument turns from, hey, listen, there's no data to support those claims, and so you're like either misinterpreting it or making it up or delusional. And then it's like, well, you house Negro, like this crazy, like backwood, super racist shit.
It
And
tends
I
to
would be like,
happen.
I'm like, yo, this is crazy.
Tends to
It's
happen
so
when
much to the
people
point
are
where it's like
false.
changed my avatar. And I'd be like, yo, why am I even changing my profile photo to what, stop people from being racist online with me? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, so that's when I was like, yo, listen, I can't let, other people impact my own actions in that way. Like,
No, yeah, you got to stay. Like that's one thing Joe Rogan does say that I agree with. Post and leave. Get out of there. Just don't go back for a while. If I went through my comments on some of my like clips that I've made or just videos, dude, I would lose it. Sometimes they're good. Like I had a psychedelic artist not too long. This is the cool thing. I get to talk to people like who are scientists, and then I get to talk to psychedelic artists who are telling me that trees are alive, or they are alive, but they're conscious. And I'm like,
they're not conscious.
and see,
Yeah, they're not conscious.
you see exactly, and I get to hear these points of views, and then I'm just sitting here with all this knowledge about trees being conscious and not conscious, and then I'm like, well, then I have my own argument at night, feeding me for my nighttime overthinking. But no, it's cool because I can go from different realms. But I digress. You can't let yourself see what people are saying about you because they're gonna be rude as fuck. They're gonna be so rude.
Yeah,
People are so mean.
It gets crazy, and I think it's because like not to sound arrogant, but you can't have like a intellectual, deep, esoteric even conversation with everyone. Everyone's not up for that shit.
Yeah.
And so you gotta the internet is just a smorgasbord of, everyone's got a keyboard and internet access. And that's not always the people you should be like, having conversations with about, everything. So yeah, I don't and part of this too is like I don't post as much on social media because I graduated and I'm working and I'm just like super swamped, and like posting on social media has just been deprioritized for me. But also too, it's like, do I even want to police the internet anymore? Because like that's what I felt like. So if coronavirus happened like 3 years ago, I would have been posting about coronavirus myths and debunking videos and all type of crazy stuff. Like I would have been doing that.
Kind of what Kennan does.
Yeah. So he's, Kennan started. Shit, he might be a third year.
I think he's a fourth year.
He might be. Yeah. So he's finishing soon. Or he should be. PhDs are usually like 4 to 6 years, depending on what happens. But yeah, I can't do that anymore. And I applaud the people that do, because I'm like, this is a good video. It was done good. I'll share it. But like right now, people are saying with the vaccines that it's making them magnetic.
I saw that.
And they're sticking keys to their forehead. And I'm like, should I even take the 15? Because it's the reality. I'm not a physicist, right? But like, I can make a scientific argument. I could probably do some research, find some sources, explain why this shit is complete bullshit. It probably would take me like an hour. Is it worth my hour to do that? I've come to be like, it's not that's not what I want to spend my
Time.
yeah, I'd rather talk to like high school kids who are like thinking about college careers or some shit like that, or get on a podcast and like have an interesting conversation than like make a post debunking something that is so ridiculous, in my opinion, right? But plenty of people are believing that, so somebody needs to do it. I just have let go of that like scientific communication responsibility.
Yeah, dude. My most watched TikTok ever is a video of Kenan talking about the virus, vaccine when it first came out in February, and
Uh-huh.
oh man, the comments. Oh, you don't know.
Crazy.
They were like, my cousin got lupus and got hit by a bus, and my uncle has brain tumor now, and it was just like, and then people were like, you're an idiot, and you're an idiot, and it was just people arguing. I would like, because they weren't, and some of them were being like, oh, he's not talking about this though. And now, granted, I posted it 4 months later, so like when we were talking in February, obviously we're not updated information.
Right.
But all these people, man, like it's fascinating. They just get in these arguments on my video
Yeah.
about the vaccine and how it's killing children, giving them malaria or something like that. And you're just like, dude, what are you talking about, man?
You know, it's a crazy thing too. And I'm sure you're a philosophy guy, so like, appealing to authority and like all of the like the fallacies and stuff, and yo, don't get me wrong, nobody should listen to me because I've got a PhD in cancer biology, right? Like that does not automatically make me right. But at the same time, there is a reason why we have experts. And I feel like in today's society, we have, especially in the age of the internet, we have like seriously devalued expertise.
For sure.
Like the perception of, like I've been in school for fucking ever. And I'm like, don't get me wrong, I'm probably not right about everything, but I'm really confident in the narrow slice of knowledge that I've carved out, right? And that's what an expert is supposed to do. Is supposed to be really proficient in that thing or things. And I feel like because the internet provides information, it's like I've done my research, which is the craziest thing I always hear whenever I get into somebody with like a scientific argument. They're like, well, I've done my research and this and the third. And I'm like, remember elementary school when they used to like teach you like primary and like secondary resources and like and like who, what, when, where, why, and like people will like read something on the internet that agrees with them, and then
It's true.
that's it. That's all they need. And in my head, I was like, as a scientist, it's like I know that all scientific papers are not created equal. I also know that just because something is published, yes, it undergoes peer review, but that doesn't mean it's right. Part of what scientists do is debate with each other all the time to get to the right answer. And these are the smartest people in the world, essentially, right? The people who hold the PhDs, these are some of the smartest humans in the world, are trying to figure out the complex shit. And Timothy, who works at fucking Cracker Jack, has figured out the government's anti-population scheme.
Hey,
Give me a
fuck you,
goddamn break.
Timothy.
Yeah, like give me a break. I mean, like again, I try not to sound like an asshole with this stuff, but it's like we also live in a culture where like everyone's opinion has to be like validated and like
Everyone's got to be not offended by someone else.
yeah. And at the same time, it's like I should totally be within my right to say, hey, Timmy, you're probably a smart guy. Listen, you can get smarter, and you probably work at Cracker Jack right now, but you are in no way, shape, or form in a position to be making arguments about what the fuck the government is or isn't doing, as compared to whomever, right?
That's what pisses me off the most, is that when intelligent people are morons and they make these invalid arguments in an intelligent way. It's like, bro, you could be using your brain for so many other things than talking about some dumb alien. What are they? What are they? The lizard people.
Oh
President.
right, yeah. That's man. So it gets to an interesting point too, because just like how we have smart people who believe in crazy shit, and like they're wasting their like essentially their intelligence or their aptitudes on this crazy shit. There's also really smart people who have understood that they're smart, or they know that they're smarter than average, and they're using their arguments to like essentially profit themselves or build followers. And this happens on Instagram a lot. So like, because there's like a flip side of like the influencer thing. They're smart people. They're figuring it out. They understand what works and what doesn't work. And I hate those people too.
Would you consider Gary Vee one of those people?
Yo, no, not at all. I say this because also a question: why would you bring up Gary Vee in that context?
Because I like Gary Vee, but I think he's figured out he's definitely figured out the way, because he's very smart with social media, because he's like early investor and things like that. But he understands how to reach people's minds in the right way. Like he understands what he can get as much people to listen as he wants to.
Yeah, I love Gary Vee. I think he's a genius. He doesn't got he's got a fucking degree from Crackerjack University. Who knows? He's brilliant. Like, and degrees, like degree, no degree doesn't matter. The guy is brilliant. He has understood the whole social media game. He's got booming companies, VaynerMedia, all that shit. I'm a huge Gary Vee fan. But most of the stuff he says is shit that we should already be doing.
Same thing, yeah, dude. It's all of them though, isn't it?
Yeah, he's not like super, and when it comes to like talking about content and stuff, yes, for sure, he's definitely got a strategy, and you should definitely listen to him when he's giving that advice. When he's giving like life advice, I'm like, this is just what you're supposed to be doing.
Like,
and
be
the shit
kind.
is like, yeah, right, exactly. Like, be kind and be patient. In my head, I'm like,
I didn't know that.
like, yo, this guy is Jesus. That's not. So no, not Gary Vee, because like that's Gary Vee's like job, is like what you're getting from him is to like he market himself. I think it's more so like guys that promote like like the herbal remedies and stuff like that, and like diet trends and stuff. I don't think all of these people believe their own, like they're not drinking their own Kool-Aid. I think some of these people know that it's bullshit. They know that they're bullshitting people, but they're intelligent and they're taking advantage of that. And I hate those people more than I hate the people who really believe that the lemon tea milkshake somehow makes you lose weight, and it's the fact that you're eating less calories. It's something about the lemon shake.
There's a guy, V Shred. He does that. He's always like, "Would cake or salad or what, something like that?" And you're like, "Obviously pizza or whatever." And he's shredded. He's like, "No, dude, eating like shit. It clearly makes you more overweight than not eating like shit. Even if you work out, if you eat bad, you're not going to be as fit as you would be if you don't eat bad. It's like, you're not going to. Yes, we would all rather eat pizza, and you can eat pizza once in a while, but you shouldn't be eating pizza every night. Stop telling people they can do that, because they can't."
Yeah, I mean, unless you wake up in the morning and you go, and that's all you do is go to the gym, and you're, I mean, like,
I don't even think he eats it though. I think he's just like, he just shows it. It's definitely bullshit. He's too shredded for it to not be bullshit. And he's on
testosterone.
Yeah.
He's juicing.
Yeah, you could be that. But also, it could be you have enough money. You could be making like good steak and good chicken and things like that, where it's like you don't have to eat this bland chicken and rice like everybody else does. You have enough money to where you can promote bullshit and still eat healthy. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I will say this though. I hated vegetables like my entire life until I got turned into an adult, and started eating at like nice restaurants and stuff. And I was like, oh, vegetables don't have to taste like shit.
Yeah.
So like the whole eating healthy thing too is like, and I used to get into a lot of nutrition arguments, especially with like supplements and diet and stuff like that. Again, I think there's like losing weight is a lot less complicated than people make it seem. It's just a consistency thing. The reality is that bad food tastes good and your brain likes it.
Yes, it does.
And working out sucks.
But your brain likes it.
Time. Huh?
But your brain does like it if you get
your brain likes it. Your brain loves, after you've been working out, because your brain loves that. But at the moment, it sucks a bag of
Right
dicks.
before, right before is the worst part. You're like, fuck, I
Yeah,
don't
like,
do this shit. Especially leg
oh,
day
I
for
gotta run
dudes.
5 miles. I don't want to do that.
It's leg day for dudes.
Wanna-
Like, mother.
yeah. So, but it's like it's just about consistency, right? And it's like the whole eating thing is like keto versus all this stuff. Listen, if you want to lose weight, eat less calories than you burn. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
No special diet required. No vegetables gonna do, especially in the U.S. Like you go to the grocery store, there's bananas from Guatemala there. Like there's literally everything on the planet there, like in your Whole Foods or normal
Definitely.
supermarket. So there's no reason for you not to have a balanced diet. You don't need to eat certain foods at certain times of the day and all this other crazy shit that they make up to make them valid. Their health advice valid, I think. They're making it up. And so I think it's part of like their gimmick to make it seem really complicated so that they can provide you with like the expertise of them being like this health guru type shit. Because if it was don't eat a pizza before you go to sleep every night, that's really quick advice that you don't have to pay me hundreds of dollars for.
Yeah, you should know not to eat a whole pizza before you go to bed at night. But all right, man, I think this was a good way to end it. It's a fun conversation to have.
Right on.
Um, hold on.